Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day, wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this. We're going to jump into episode 2 here of the Magnus Archives. I really enjoyed the first episode, so I'm looking forward to seeing where episode 2 is going to go, and just to see kind of the evolution of this podcast and see where it goes. So today we're checking out Magnus Archives number 2, Do Not Open, horror narration / horror stories. Links will be down below in the description to the original video. Excuse me, got my commentary and reaction, and to the Rusty Quill Podcast channel. I'll probably just be putting the actual playlist for the whole podcast in here, and they have an actual website to all of their stuff, where I think you can get like merch and some other stuff. So I will link all that down below as well. So yeah, if you enjoy this video, be sure to go over there and give it a like. Check out all the stuff on their channel, check out all the stuff on their website. If you want to, check out what kind of Patreon stuff they got going on, etc. If you want to take your support for them to the next level. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live, as I am right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. So if you'd like to take your support for my channel to the next level, you can check all that stuff out. But regardless, I just greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hang out and watch the video. It means a lot. Thank you guys very much for doing so. So yeah, we're gonna jump in here. Again, this is Magnus Archives number 2, Do Not Open, by the Rusty Quill Podcasts. So let's do it. Let's get in it. Bada boom, bada bing.
Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
This is one of your early favorites.
Episode 2. Do Not Open.
Do not open. The opening music definitely does a good job of setting the atmosphere. Well, it does get a little bit loud.
Statement of Joshua Gillespie regarding his time in possession of an apparently empty wooden casket. Original statement given November 22nd, 1998. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. Statement begins. It started when I was in Amsterdam for a holiday with a few of my friends. Everything you're thinking right now, you're right. We were all early 20s, just graduated, and decided to spend a couple of weeks going crazy on the continent, so you can almost certainly fill in all the blanks yourself. There were very few points where I'd say that I was entirely sober, and even fewer where I acted like it, though I wasn't quite as bad as some of my friends who had a hard time handling themselves at times. This may have been why I headed out alone that morning. No idea of the exact date, but it was sometime in mid-May. The others were sleeping off their assorted hangovers, and I decided to head out into the beautiful sunshine of that Netherlands morning and take a walk. Before graduating from Cardiff with the others, I had been studying architecture, so was looking forward to spending a few hours by myself to wander and really take in the buildings of central Amsterdam.
Yeah, side note, that's one of the things that I would love to do at some point in time. I've never been out of the States, but there's definitely a lot of places in Europe that I would love to go see, to just see some old cathedrals and architecture, go to Rome, see the Colosseum, etc. So, I don't know. I'm just saying that kind of, made me think about it. Anyway.
I was not disappointed. It's a beautiful city, but I realized too late that I hadn't taken any map or guidebook with me.
Yeah.
And an hour or two later, I was thoroughly lost. I wasn't particularly worried, as it was still mid-afternoon at this point, and getting lost in the back streets had kind of been what I was trying to do. But I still decided I'd better make an actual effort to find my way back to where my friends and I were staying off Ellenstraat. I managed it eventually, but my inability to speak Dutch meant I spent a good hour riding the wrong way on the various trams. By the time I got back to Ellenstraat, it was starting to get dark. I was feeling quite stressed, so I decided to pop into one of the cafes to relax before joining up with my friends. I couldn't say for sure exactly how long I was in there, but I do know it had gotten fully dark by the time I noticed I wasn't sat at my table alone. I've tried to describe the man who now sat opposite me many times, but it's difficult. He was short, very short, and felt like he had an odd density to him. His hair was brownish, I think, cut quite short, and he was clean-shaven. His face and dress were utterly unremarkable, and the more I try to think of exactly what he looked like, the harder it is to picture him clearly.
Interesting.
To be honest, though, I'm inclined to blame that on the drugs. The man introduced himself as John, and asked how I was.
No relation.
I replied as best I could, and he nodded, saying he was also an Englishman inside a foreign land. I remember he used that exact phrase because it struck me at the time as very odd. He said he was from Liverpool, though I don't recall him having any sort of accent.
Right.
And he was looking for a friend who he could rely on for a favor.
Yeah, this story so far definitely does feel very SCP-ish.
Now, high as I was,
I'm waiting to hear of the Foundation come in and like raid this place.
I got suspicious as soon as he said that last part, and I started to shake my head. John said it was nothing too onerous, just looking after a package for him until he had some friends pick it up, and that he would pay well. I thought
that sounds very suspect.
And was about to refuse it.
Here's a package. Just sit here and watch it for me, and I'll pay you very well. That doesn't sound like anything illegal happening at all.
Again, when he reached into his jacket, I think, and pulled out an envelope. Inside was £10,000. I know, I counted it. I knew it was a stupid move, but I kept remembering my friend Richard telling me how easy it had been to get a pound of hash through customs on his first trip to Holland, and holding that much cash in my hands, I said yes. John smiled, thanked me, and said that he would be in touch. He left the coffee shop, and I immediately started panicking about what I had agreed to. I wanted to chase after him and return the money, but something weighed me down, kept me locked into my seat. I just sat there for a long time. I don't remember much about the next few days except worrying about when I'd see John again. I was careful not to spend any of the money he'd given me, and had decided to return it as soon as he turned up. I'd say I had made a mistake and couldn't take his money, or look after anything from him. I tried to enjoy myself, but it was like this shadow hanging over me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I waited for days, right up until the end of our trip, but he never showed up. I obsessively checked my suitcase before boarding the plane home, just in case someone had snuck something into it, but there was nothing new in there. I flew back to England with my friends still high and £10,000 tucked into my coat pocket. It was surreal. It wasn't until almost a year later that I felt confident enough to actually spend any of the money. I'd moved down to work for a small architect's firm in Bournemouth on the south coast. It was an entry-level job and the pay wasn't great, but it was the only offer I got in my chosen field, so I moved down there with the hopes of getting some experience and a better position in a year or two.
So, I mean, so far it seems like something with the money is what is gonna like cause the problem. Maybe spending the money in itself brings some kind of bad luck or something. I don't know.
Bournemouth was a decent size.
I mean, obviously the title of this is Do Not Open, so I mean, you open up the money. I don't know.
Seaside town, though much less idyllic than I'd assumed it would have been. But rents for a place of my own were a little bit out of my price range, given my starting pay grade. I didn't know anyone else down there and wasn't keen to share my space with strangers, so I decided to use some of the money I'd been given in Amsterdam the previous year. I reasoned they were unlikely to find me at this stage. I'd not given John any of my details when he spoke to me, not even my name. And if they had...
See, the thing is though, man, right? Like, I don't know. For me, I would be just paranoid that they would have someone like following and tracking me for some reason, right? Because I agreed to some kind of deal and this dude gave me 10,000, pounds, they're going to expect something from me regardless of how long, it's been. So I would assume that somehow, some way, they've got people following me, tracking me, know where I am. They might have been like casing me out beforehand to specifically pick me as some kind of person they feel like would be amenable to whatever they're trying to do, so I don't know. I wouldn't let my guard down like that.
Hadn't been able to find me over the course of the last year, it was doubtful they'd be able to track me here. Also, if it had been drug smuggling as I suspected, £10,000 probably wasn't so much money to them that they'd track me this far over it.
That is a good point, though. I don't know. I'd still think they'd probably track him, but I mean, £10,000 in the grand scheme of like a drug smuggling thing probably isn't a whole lot of money. You know what I'm saying? So that would also, though, lend me to think that it probably isn't something to do with drugs. It would be something else, but still.
Also, and looking back, this sounds stupid, but I'd just grown a beard and thought it would be hard for anyone to recognize me as the same guy, so I spent a bit of
the Clark Kent effect. Let me just put on glasses and no one will see me.
John's money on renting a nice one-bedroom flat in the Triangle near the town centre and moved in almost immediately. About a week later, I was in my kitchen cutting up some fruit for breakfast, and I heard the doorbell ring. I answered it to see two red-faced delivery men. Between them, they carried an immense package, which they'd clearly had to maneuver up the narrow stairs of the building I lived in. They asked if I was Joshua Gillespie, and when I said yes, they said they had a delivery addressed to me, and pushed past into the hall. They didn't seem to be from any delivery company I knew, and they weren't wearing any uniforms. I tried to ask them some questions, but as soon as they'd placed the box on the floor, they turned around and walked out. They were both well over 6 feet tall and very imposing, so there was little I could have done to stop them leaving, even if I'd wanted to. The door slammed behind them, and I was left alone with this package. It was about 2 meters long, maybe 1 meter wide, and roughly the same deep. It was sealed with parcel tape, and written on the top was my name and address in thick, curving letters. But there was no return address or...
See, that in itself would be creepy, right? The fact that you've moved to a new place and they found you and that's addressed to you at the new place.
Postmark of any sort. I was starting to risk being late for work at this point, but I decided I couldn't bring myself to leave without seeing what was inside, so I fetched the knife from my kitchen counter and cut the tape, keeping the box closed.
See, man, for me, I wouldn't open it regardless. Like, it would kill me, honestly. Like, the curiosity really would be like driving me to want to open it to know, because I would absolutely want to know what's inside. But in this kind of a situation, I for sure would not open it, because if for whatever reason something happens, the cops or whatever get involved, I don't know, I could just be like, I don't know, this mysterious package just showed up in my place. I don't know what it is, who, it's addressed to me. I don't know. I never opened it. I don't know what's inside. So at least you have some kind of level of deniability, I guess, but yeah, that's super creepy.
Inside was a coffin. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. My knife fell to the floor and I just stared at it in mute surprise. It was made of unvarnished pale yellow wood and had a thick metal chain wrapped around it.
Yikes.
It was closed at the top with a heavy...
This again feels very SCP-ish with Abel. I'm expecting Abel to pop out of there with his sword and start going to town.
Iron padlock. The lock was closed, but had the key sitting inside it.
Yeah, very.
I started to reach for it when I noticed two other things on the coffin lid. The first was a piece of paper folded in half and tucked under the chain, which I took. The other was the presence of 3 words scratched deep into the wood of the casket in letters 3 inches high. They read, "Do not open." I withdrew my hand from the padlock slowly, unsure what I was supposed to do. At some point I must have sat down, as I found myself on the floor propped up against the wall, staring at this bizarre thing that had inexplicably turned up at my home. I remembered the piece of paper at this point and unfolded it, but it simply read, "Delivered with gratitude, J." Strange as it sounds, it was only then I made the connection with the man I'd met in Amsterdam. He'd told me he wanted someone to look after a package for a while. Was this the package he was talking about? Was I to be looking after a corpse? Who was coming to pick it up? When? I called in sick to work.
Yeah, I would too, for sure.
Watching the coffin for what might have been minutes or might have been hours. I just had no idea what to do. Eventually I steeled myself and moved towards it, until my face was just inches away from the lid. I took a deep breath, trying to see if I could smell anything from inside. Nothing. If there was a dead body in there, it hadn't started to smell yet. Not that I really knew what a dead body smelled like. It was early summer at this point, which would mean that...
I feel like if a dead body started to smell, you would know it very quickly. It's not something that I've experienced, but I mean, you know, doing outdoorsy stuff, I've experienced the smell of dead animals, fish, etc. You know what that smell is after the first time you smelled it. So, I mean, I feel like you would know if something in there was dead and rotting.
They must have died recently, if there was a body in there at all. As I got up, my hand brushed the wood of the coffin, and I realized it was warm. Very warm, like it had been lying in the sun for hours. Something about it made my flesh crawl slightly, and I withdrew my hand quickly.
I wouldn't want to have anything to do with this, man. I would just keep it sealed. I would find somewhere to put it in my place that is as inconspicuous as possible, covered up with as much shit as possible, and just try to forget about it until they come to pick it up again, I guess. I don't know. Right? Like, what else are you really going to do?
I decided to make a cup of tea. It was something of a relief standing next to the kettle, as from that angle I couldn't see the thing out in the hall. I could just ignore it. I didn't move even after I'd filled my mug. I just stood there, sipping my tea, not even noticing it was still far too hot to drink comfortably. When I finally got the nerve to step back out into the hall, the coffin still lay there, unmoving. I finally made a decision and, firmly gripping the padlock, I removed the key and placed it on the hall table next to the door. I then took hold of the coffin and chain and started to pull it further into my flat. It was weird to touch it. The wood still had that unsettling warmth to it, but the chain was as cold as you'd expect from a thick piece of iron, and apparently hadn't taken on any of the heat. I didn't have any cupboards with enough space to hold the thing, so in the end I just dragged it into my living room and pushed it up against the wall as out of the way as possible. I cut up the cardboard box it had been sealed in and put it with the rubbish outside. And just like that I had, apparently, started storing a coffin in my home. At the time, I think I assumed it was full of drugs. At least, as far as I assumed anything about the
situation. It really does, yeah. Music does a good job of setting the ambience.
Noticeable way, or with a total stranger like me, these weren't questions I could even guess at an answer to. But I decided it was best to think about it as little as possible. For the next few days I avoided my living room, as I found being so close to the thing made me nervous.
Yeah.
I was also staying alert for the smell of any sort of rot, which might indicate there was something dead inside the coffin after all. I never smelled anything, though, and as the days passed, I found myself noticing my mysterious charge less and less. About a week after it arrived, I finally started using my living room again. I'd watch TV mostly and keep half an eye on the unmoving casket. At one point, I got so cocky as to actually use it as a table. I was drinking a glass of orange juice at the time and absent-mindedly placed it on top of the lid, not really realizing exactly what I had done. At least, Not until I heard movement from underneath it.
Yikes,
I
brother.
froze, listening intently and staring, willing myself to have been imagining things. But then it came again. A soft but insistent scratching.
Nope.
Just below where I had placed my glass.
Nope.
It was slow and deliberate, and caused gentle ripples to spread across the surface of my juice. Needless to say, I was terrified. More than that, I was confused. The coffin had been lying in my living room, chained and unmoving, for well over a week at this point. If there had been anything living in there when it was delivered, it seemed unlikely it would still be alive.
Right.
And why hadn't it made any sound before if there was something in there capable of movement? I gently picked up my glass, and immediately the scratching stopped. I waited for some time, considering my options, before I placed it back down on the other end of the lid. It took about 4 seconds for the scratching to start up again, now more insistently.
Hey, I mean, you got a zombie in there that wants some orange juice, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like, what else could it be? This is a good one. It was the Roth habit where the nose started for me. Yeah.
When I took the glass away this time, it didn't stop for another 5 minutes.
Yikes.
I decided against doing any further experiments, and instead made the very deliberate decision to ignore it.
Yeah,
I felt at that point I either needed to use the heavy iron key.
I feel like at this point I would be scrambling for any kind of way to find John and contact them and be like, listen, dog, you need to get this shit out of my place. Here's your fucking money back. I haven't spent $1 of it. Get this out of my place. Although I think he did say he started spending some money out of it. That's why he got the new place, right?
To open it and see for myself what was in there, or follow the gouged instruction and resolve myself to never look inside. Some might call me a coward, but I decided on the latter, that I would interact with it as little as possible while it lived in my house. Well, I guess lived may be the wrong term. I knew I'd
I guess, right? But like, how long do you want me to watch this fucking thing, brother? Right? Like, there has to be some limitation. Because granted, like, you got 10,000 pounds from it, but even so, 10,000 pounds isn't worth having a fucking weird ass coffin in your place with potentially some kind of like undead thing in there.
Made the right decision the next time it rained, and I heard the box begin to moan. It was a Saturday, and I was spending the day staying in and doing some light.
And I mean, like, what would happen if you were to somehow like get the coffin out of your place and like just throw it somewhere? Just fucking take it to a dump and just leave it. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would happen? Would they drag it back? Would John come find you and be like, listen, dog, breach a contract, your soul's mine or something? You know what I'm saying? Like, there were no real stipulations. There was no like time length for how I'm supposed to watch this. He said, watch it for a while. Well, I mean, for me, a while's 1 day. It's been here for 24 hours. That's a while. I'm done. I'm taking this out of here. Assuming the vehicle could transport a coffin. I mean, I would find a way to transport something. You know what I'm saying? Get a truck, throw it in the bed, take it to a dump, take it to a river, drop it off, do whatever, get it out of my place. If this thing starts fucking making creepy ass noises like this, it's out of here, brother.
Reading. I had few friends in Bournemouth. Something about having a mysterious coffin lying in my living room made me reluctant to make the sort of connections that might lead to people coming round.
Yeah,
and so I spent most of my free time alone. I didn't watch a lot of television even before my living room was taken over with storing this thing, and so I now found myself sat in my room reading quite a lot. I remember I'd just started Michael Crichton's The Lost World at the time, and it started raining outside. It was a hard, heavy rain. The sort that falls straight down with no wind to disturb it until everything
big old fat rain.
And wet. It was barely past midday, but I remember the sky was so overcast and gloomy that I had to get up to turn on the light. And that was when I heard it. It was a low, gentle sound. I've seen Dawn of the Dead. I know what the groans of the undead are meant to sound like, but it wasn't that at all. It was almost melodious, It sounded almost like singing, if it was muffled by 20 feet of hard-packed soil. At first, I thought it might have been coming from one of the other flats in my building, but as it went on and the hairs on my arm began to stand on end, I just knew where it was coming from. I walked to the living room and stood in the doorway, watching as the sealed wooden box continued to moan its soft, musical sound out of the rain. There was nothing to be done. I'd made my decision not to open it, and this certainly did not make me want to reconsider that. So I just went back to my bedroom, put on some music, and turned it up loud enough to drown out the sounds. And so it continued for a few months. Whatever was in the casket would scratch at anything placed on top of it and moan whenever it rained, and that was that.
For real.
I suppose it goes to show that you can get used to anything if you have to, no matter how bizarre. I occasionally considered trying to get rid of it or finding people like you guys to
It sounds like it.
But in the end, I decided that I was actually more afraid of whoever was responsible for entrusting me with the coffin than I was of the actual coffin itself. So I kept it secret.
Keep it secret.
That worried me
Keep it safe.
I think it gave me bad dreams. I don't remember my dreams, never have, and if I was getting nightmares, they were no different. I didn't remember them, and I certainly don't now. But I know I kept waking up in a panic, clutching at my throat and struggling to breathe. I also started sleepwalking. The first time that happened, it was the cold that woke me up. It was the middle of winter, and I tend not to keep the heating on when I'm asleep. It took me a few seconds to fully process where I was. I was standing in the dark in my living room, over the coffin. What
That's
concerned
fucking
me
weird,
more
brother.
about the situation was the fact that when I awoke, I seemed to be holding the key to it in my hand.
That is like, you're getting it. It says don't open, and you're starting to sleepwalk and like go to open it in your sleep. That to me would be like a sign that this is starting to get dangerous. And again, you got to find some kind of way of getting rid of this, brother. Like, no. Because now in my mind, it's like, okay, I can't go to sleep. I can't sleep because I can't trust myself when I go to sleep, because I'm going to wake up at some point in time and have opened this thing. And there's specific instructions that say do not open. And we're getting some creepy supernatural stuff here with some kind of like undead thing potentially locked away in this, because it's a coffin. It's airtight. Man can't breathe. It's chained up and padlocked, yet something's in there and has been in there for months now. I'm sorry, but this ain't worth 10 grand, brother. No, sir.
Obviously, this worried me. I even went to my GP about it, who referred me to the sleep clinic at the nearby hospital, but the problems never occurred in a clinical setting. I decided to hide the key in more and more difficult to access places, but still I kept waking up with it.
Of course.
I was starting to panic. When I awoke one morning to find I'd actually placed the key within the lock and was, as far as I could tell, moments from opening it.
Nope.
I knew I had to find a solution. In the end, what I took to doing was perhaps a bit elaborate, but it seemed to work. I would place the key within a bowl of water and then put it in the freezer, encasing it in a solid block of ice.
Ah, that's actually pretty smart.
I still sometimes found myself trying to get to the key in my sleep, but the chill of the ice always woke me up long before I could do anything with it.
That's big brain right there.
Yet another part of my routine. I lived like that for almost a year and a half.
A year and a half, and you're still watching this goddamn thing. John, come take this fucking coffin off me, brother. This is not worth 10 grand.
It's funny how fear can just become as routine as hunger. At a certain point, I just accepted it. My first clue that my time keeping the coffin was coming to an end was when it began to rain and there was silence. I didn't notice at first, as my habit at that point had been to put on the music as soon as the weather began to turn. But after a few minutes, I realized that there wasn't anything to drown out. I turned off my music and went to check. The living room was silent. Then came a knock at the door. The sound was light and unobtrusive. but it rang out like thunder in the quiet flat. I knew what I'd see as soon as I opened the door, and I was right. John and the 2 delivery men stood there. I wasn't surprised to see them, as I say, but they actually seemed quite surprised to see me.
Get this fucking thing out of my place, now.
John had to take a second to look me up and down, almost in disbelief, as I asked if they'd come to collect their coffin. He said that they had, and he hoped it hadn't been too much trouble. I told him where he could stick it, and he didn't.
Too much fucking trouble? Yeah. You had me watching over this weird ass thing for over a year and a half for 10 grand, brother. It's more like, 10 mil at least. That's like minimum. I want to raise.
Seemed to have an answer for that. He did seem.
Yeah, that was an interesting detail. That they were surprised he was still alive. Because I mean, obviously, there is some kind of draw that happens where you're supposed to open it, and then I assume it's supposed to be like you inside the coffin, right? Like an alternate version of you or something along those lines. And if you open it, then you trap yourself inside the coffin, is what ends up happening.
I'm genuinely impressed, however, when I got the key out of the freezer. I didn't even try to thaw it. I was so eager to have this thing out of my life that I just dropped the bowl of ice on the floor and shattered it. I watched as John picked the icy key off the floor, and I told them it was in the living room. I didn't follow them. I didn't want to see what they did with the coffin. I didn't want to see if they opened it. And when the screaming started, I didn't want to see who was screaming.
What the fuck, brother?
I only left.
Don't do this in my apartment. No.
The kitchen when the 2 delivery men carried the coffin past the door. I followed them down the stairs and watched in the pouring rain as they locked it into a small van marked Beacon and Hope Deliveries.
Beacon and Hope Deliveries.
Then they drove away. There was no sign of John. That was the last I heard of it. I got a new job and moved to London shortly afterwards. And now I just try not to think about it too much.
Interesting. He moved to London. Isn't that where John said he was to begin with? That he was from London and a foreign land? Maybe he just said he was a British person from a foreign land. Maybe that's what it was at the beginning. But I could have swore he said he was from London, and it's interesting that he would move to London. That would mean he would be closer to that whole thing. I don't know.
Statement ends.
Liverpool. You're right. I think you did say Liverpool. You're right. Okay.
Always nice to hear that my hometown. And now I just try not to think about it too much. Statement ends. It's always nice to hear that my hometown is not entirely devoid of odd occurrences and eerie stories. Ice cream, beaches, and boredom are all very well, but I'm glad to hear Bournemouth has at least a few apparitions to call its own. That said, the fact is Mr. Gillespie's statement starts with drug use and continues on with the lack of corroborating witnesses being a central theme,
True.
Which means that an eerie story is all that it is. When the Institute first investigated, it doesn't look like they were able to find a single piece of evidence to support the existence of this scratched coffin. And to be honest, I didn't think it was worth wasting anyone's time over now, nearly 20 years later. That said, I did mention it to Tim yesterday, and apparently he did some digging of his own. Beacon and Hope did in fact exist, and were a courier service that operated until 2009 when they went into liquidation. They were based in Nottingham, however, significantly north of Bournemouth, and if they kept records of their deliveries, they are no longer available. What is interesting, however, is the address Mr. Gillespie provided for the flat this all took place in. The housing association that ran it does keep extensive records on the tenants that have lived in their buildings going back some 40 or 50 years. From what Tim could find, it appears that for the 2 years of his residence, Mr. Gillespie was the only person living in that entire building.
What?
With the other 7 flats being utterly vacant. Nobody moved in following his departure, and the building was sold to a developer and demolished shortly after this statement was originally given. Predictably, no one who worked for that housing association in the 90s is still there, and despite Tim's best efforts, we could get no explanation for why, in a building of that size, Mr. Gillespie spent almost 2 years living alone.
I mean, did he essentially like buy the whole building, right? With the money? Did he rent it out for those 2 years? I mean, I don't know. That is very strange though.
Save for an old wooden coffin. Recording ends.
Right, yeah. That's what it seems like, right? But it's interesting. So like, well, I guess let's see if this plays anything more here before I give my final thoughts.
The Magnus Archives is a podcast distributed by RustyQuill.com and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike International License. Today's episode was written by Jonathan Sims. It was recorded and produced by Murray Porter and directed by Alexander J. Newell. To comment on episodes, make donations and view links, images, videos, and show notes, visit RustyQuill.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, visit us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter at The Rusty Quill, or email us at mail@rustyquill.com. Thanks for listening.
Okay, there we go. So that's the end of that. So yeah, it's interesting, right? That like I guess I'd have to kind of go back and listen to the beginning again, but it made it out that like he voluntarily found this place and moved in there, right? It didn't seem like there was anything that was specifically pushing him to, you know, move into this specific place. So is it a situation where like subconsciously, you know, he was guided there and moved in, and like John and whatever these people are, they owned the building maybe, and like they didn't rent it out and they specifically set it up for him there, or what? But I mean, yeah, that's kind of intriguing. Or somehow they knew who would move. Yeah, somehow something, you know. But it's a very interesting and intriguing story. And of course, you know, the drug aspect of it, you could kind of be like, okay, well, maybe he was doing drugs the whole time, you know, and so maybe this was all some kind of like drug fever thing, because I mean, it's like he said at the beginning of everything, he had gotten 10,000 pounds and, you know, it was easy for him to smuggle out hash or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Though he said he didn't necessarily do that, maybe that's an omission, you know, from his side of the story. Maybe he was on drugs this whole time. Maybe that's why he moved into that place, because no one else lived there and it was a place for him to just sit there and get high for those couple of years. And then once he cleaned himself up, you know, he moved out or whatever. Who knows? But it seems like that's not the case, right? Because why would someone just randomly give you like 10 grand out of nowhere without anything to do? But yeah, it is interesting that at the end, when John and the delivery guys came, they were surprised to see him alive. Again, that could be another drug related thing. Maybe they would have thought he would have, you know, OD'd and killed himself, or if it is drug related, or yeah, whatever was going on with his coffin, they expected him to open it up. You know, I mean, who knows? Who knows? The coffin and the opening it up could be metaphors for drug related stuff, or it could very well be, you know, that some supernatural crazy stuff happened. There was some kind of also what happened to John came with the delivery guys and something, and delivery guys left with the coffin. Right, and he just disappeared. So no sign of him. Exactly. And I mean, that's what happened the first time he met John too, right? John gave him the money, they had the discussion, and then he wanted to go find John, and then I think eventually he did get up and go look for him, but he was gone, right? And he couldn't find him. But I don't know, man. I obviously, I'm curious to know what would have happened if he had opened the coffin. I assume it's a situation where like if he had opened the coffin, it would have been him inside the coffin, and he would have like essentially trapped himself in there and would have died, you know, kind of a thing, which is why John was surprised to see him alive. But it's also like, what was in the coffin then? Because when they drug it out at the end, you know, he said they were screaming going on as they were dragging the thing out. You know, I don't know. Nothing good. That's what yeah, for real. So I mean, this could have this could have been like a metaphorical story for, you know, drug addiction, and, you know, maybe the opening of the coffin could have signified like that line of him taking too much and ODing on whatever he was taking that could have killed him. And so like every time he was like sleepwalking and thinking about opening it was like him like stepping towards that line of like doing too much and backing off. Or again, it could have just been some weird, creepy ass supernatural thing where, yeah, this dude gave him $10,000 and told him you're gonna watch his package, and then he got a coffin delivered to him with some kind of weird ass undead thing in there that he had to watch for what, 2 years, 2.5 years, I think is what it said. Like, I'm sorry, but that's way too long for the amount of money you gave me, brother. Nope. But it is also strange, right, that like at the end they told us that the entire building was vacant, and during the whole thing John never noticed, or not John, the main character, I forget his name. Did he even say his name? I don't remember. But the main character, you know, the one kind of telling the story, never noticed that no one else was living in the apartment. That's another kind of interesting detail. So is it like, did he ever really leave? We never really get any kind of, he never really talks about like once the coffin gets there and he says he called in sick to work, we never get any other kind of detail about him going to work, leaving his apartment, interacting with people. The only other thing he ever really says is he tries to avoid making friends because he doesn't want to have people come over and see this coffin there because that would be weird, right? So I mean, again, that could also be a metaphor for like drug issues. Maybe his place is all messed up, and you know, who knows? This whole thing could be, again, some kind of metaphor story for drugs and drug addiction, or it could be a very strange supernatural occurrence thing. But yeah, it's just that's one of the details about the story that is very odd, is that John never, or not John, I keep wanting to say John, but the main character never notices that no one else is living in the building, never recognizes it, never says anything, and never says anything about leaving the building, going and doing anything, you know? So like, I mean, I guess it's assumed he's got to leave and go to work, so he's got money to pay bills. But I mean, maybe just the money that was given to him was enough for him to live there for those 2 years, and he didn't need to go to work, didn't need to leave and go anywhere. But then it's like, what are you doing for food, you know? Regardless, you know, drugs aren't just going to keep you alive for 2 years. You still got to eat. So yeah, I don't know. Very interesting story. It definitely makes me want to know more about John, who and what he is. Where was he? Who are the delivery people, right? And yeah, just the idea that that whole place was vacant the entire time that he lived there, and they knew that he had moved there, and that they were surprised that he was still alive and the coffin was fine, you know? What does that all mean? You know, is John just a part of this guy's subconsciousness from, you know, some drug fueled event that he had when he went abroad? Who knows? Who knows, man? But interesting story. That was the Magnus Archives #2, Do Not Open, by the Rusty Quill Podcasts. Links will be down below in the description as always to the Magnus Archives playlist. I'm just going to put the playlist down there instead of just the original video, so you guys can go through and look at the playlist on your own if you wanted to. And I'll also put the Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel and their website down below in the links, so you can check out all of their stuff. And you know, give them follows, give them likes, give them subs, and yeah, check out whatever kind of merch and stuff they have if you want to take your support for their channel to the next level. Thank you guys for watching here. If you're still watching at the very end, I greatly appreciate it. It means a lot for you guys to be here and watch the video all the way through. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub. That helps me and the channel grow. I greatly appreciate it. Lets the YouTube algorithm gods know that you enjoy this kind of content and you would like to see some more. Definitely been enjoying the 2 episodes of the Magnus Archives I've seen before, so I'm looking forward to continuing with this series and seeing where it goes and it unfolds. So far, I mean, we've only had, like, I guess, the main kind of narrator character. We've had some other characters mentioned, but we don't hear them voiced over at all. So I'm curious when or if any of the other characters are going to actually join in and be voiced and become part of the story. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how this more unfolds. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. So if you'd like to take your support for my channel to the next level, you can check all that stuff out. But regardless, thank you guys for watching. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see y'all on the next one. Have a good one, everybody.